Does it really matter what shoes you run in? And what differentiates a running specific shoe with a casual wear sneaker? I think it's time to investigate. So today I've actually brought along a selection of casual wear sneakers and my running everyday shoes to help explain why it's so important that you really think about what you wear on your feet when you go running. Trainers, sneakers, sports shoes, runners, kicks, whatever you call them, there's a huge array available on the market, both from high street fashion stores through to running specific shops. But the line between the two is becoming more and more blurred. So today I'm going to do my best to clarify the difference between a running specific shoe and a casual wear sneaker. So a quick bit of history before we go any further on the sneaker. It was developed in 1924 and it got its name by the fact it allowed the user to sneak or walk around very quietly with the rubber sole. But I think it's fair to say that sports shoes have come a long way since then, with a lot of development in the specificity of the shoe, the comfort and the support it provides. And that certainly isn't stopping. We've seen recent huge amounts of money and time really pumped into the technology, especially in the running industry. However, the trainer or sneaker started to become fashionable in the 1970s thanks to rock stars, and sporting brands soon realised that the likes of Adidas, Nike and Puma still collaborate now with musicians and other non-sporting celebrities too. Add to that the boom of athleisure, and the line between fashion and sport continues to merge. So where does that leave us now? Well, on the plus side, it gives us a huge choice of shoes. That's great. But on the flip side, it can make it rather difficult to differentiate what is a running shoe and what is a fashion shoe. And as you can see, I've got a selection of casual shoes here, which I've managed to borrow from a few friends, as well as my running shoes. And I'm going to be taking a closer look at them and then lacing them up and going for a little run. At first glance, there's nothing glaringly obvious that differentiates these shoes, especially when you've got brands such as Adidas and Reebok, for example, making casual wear sneakers. But it's actually the design process and the internal makeup that has a huge difference. And I would love to cut these shoes in half, dissect them and show you the insides, but I don't think I'd be too popular if I did that. So instead, I'm going to do my best to explain the difference through the look and the feel of these shoes. A fashion trainer or sneaker is designed to be walked in, not for running. And the largest difference in the actual movement between running and walking comes down to the foot and how it actually strikes the ground and then how it moves through, so the stance phase of your foot. And walking shoes or fashion shoes are designed to have predominantly a heel strike, whereas running shoes are actually designed to have a mid-heel through to mid-foot strike, and some even designed for forefoot strikers. And on that topic, if you do want to find out what sort of runner and how your foot actually lands, I would seriously recommend that you head to a specialist running store. So let's take a closer look at both types. We're going to start with the bottom, the sole, and there's some fairly obvious differences here. One of the obvious features of the sole is grip, and running shoes tend to, unsurprisingly, have more grip. It's obviously designed to be worn moving faster and also for more of a change in direction. And if you have an off-road pair of running shoes, then they will have even more of a substantial grip. You compare that to a fashion shoe, and it's often much smoother and sometimes, in this case, even completely flat. If we now look at the side profile of the shoe, you can really see a difference in the shape. There's a real contrast here between this flat one and the more curved of the running shoe. So you'll get a lot more support from the running shoe with this. And again, it's going to looking at the fact that a run shoe is designed for running and a casual shoe is designed for walking, so the heel strike. But here, it's not only this end which helps with where the foot lands, but also the toe off. So as you roll through, it's going to help you with your momentum. Shock absorption is usually found in the midsole, but some shoes such as these actually have a feature on the outside as well. So on the bottom of the sole, you can see here with these cloud pods, they will add some absorption. If you get any absorption in a fashion shoe, then it tends to be more for comfort as opposed to energy return. Then we've got the durability of the sole, and obviously the actual type of material and how durable it is isn't visible, but obviously a running shoe is designed to spend several more miles being worn because you tend to run further than you're going to walk. And the final aspect to look at when you're looking at the sole, but also includes the midsole, is the flexibility of the shoe. So you want enough movement that's going to allow your foot to move for running, but not so much so that it doesn't give you enough support. So you can see a nice bit of give here. If you compare that to a fashion shoe that's designed for walking, there is pretty much zero give on this one. However, you don't want to go too far to the other extreme, because if there's too much flexibility, you're not going to get the support you need. Okay, now we're moving on to the meaty part, the midsole of the shoe. When it comes to a fashion trainer, then this is pretty much purely there to hold the outer sole together with the upper and also act as a bit of an element of fashion. But when it comes to a running shoe, it does play an integral part, as the material and the shape of the foam can actually really aid the propulsion and the energy return that you get from a running shoe. And although we can't actually see the exact makeup of that foam, you can get a bit of an idea from the feel. These casual trainers, for example, are made up of a far denser foam that has less give to touch, and as a result is actually far heavier. Whereas if you compare a running shoe, then the midsole there is designed to add that support and also a lot of shock absorption. Some running shoes even have a carbon plate inside them now, which really increases that energy return. And this is probably the most important part of the shoe, but it does actually remain hidden. So if you want to know if there's a specific pair of shoes that you've got your eye on or you're looking at, then either go to a specialist retail store and ask them the detail of how that shoe's made, or do your research online. And then finally, you've got the uppers, and as you can see, first glance here, nothing majorly obvious, but there are quite a few small differences which add up. So first up, if you take a look inside a running shoe, and it tends to have a more fitted shape of the insole, sometimes with a little bit of extra support, and also a breathable insole, because you are likely to be sweating more, obviously, in a running shoe. And then if you come to the outside, and the heel counter plays an important part in a run shoe, as this really helps to stabilize and hold the foot in place, as well as adding that support. And again, when you go to the inside of the heel, it's there to help reduce the chance of getting any blisters. And then finally, you've got the shoelaces, which in a running shoe are designed purely to hold your foot in place so that the shoe can do its job. Whereas on fashion shoes here, you can see it's very much more of a statement. Well, that's a lot on the theory, so I thought I should probably do a little bit of a comparison run, and I've got 3 mini sort of comparisons I'm going to be doing here. First one, I'm just going to lay out a figure of 8 with the cones. So that's just going to be done at a nice casual jogging pace to get a bit of a feel for the shoe. Once I've done the figure of 8, I'm going to speed things up slightly and do a shuttle run back and forth. So I'll be testing the way the shoe actually stays on my foot when I'm changing direction quickly. And then I'm going to finish off by doing some box jumps to really test the sort of shock absorption and the spring of the shoe. First up, it's this Adidas pair, and my initial reaction when I actually put them on was how wide they looked on my feet. When I looked down, it looked like they were sort of a third wider, almost as wide as they are long. And it was the sound of my feet on the floor. It was just like I was thudding away, and obviously the weight kind of felt quite cumbersome. And also on the corners, especially on the shuttle runs, I could feel that these high edges were just like rubbing on my ankle bones a little bit. And then finally, when it came to the jumps, well, that weight was definitely notable. Well, the other casual shoe I chose were these L Sport ones, and before I even put them on my feet, I could just tell how much lighter they were, and taking them a second after those Adidas ones, they actually felt quite nice initially, until I started running, and they were still light on the ground, but my foot just had very little support. And on the shuttle runs, I noticed that the most, because my forefoot was actually moving within the shoe every time I tried to turn direction. But when it came to the jumps, it kind of felt like I was jumping in barefoot, although that flexy bit there did start to kind of pinch my toes slightly. And last up, it was a running specific shoe. And admittedly, this is my shoe, so it's obviously going to feel far more comfortable. But having worn those other 2 and putting this one back on, it felt magical. It's made me appreciate just what you get from a running shoe. And you could hardly hear my feet when I was running around, and didn't really notice it because it just made me feel kind of nice and springy. It was really secure in my foot when I was going back and forth. And finally, the jumps, well, I felt nice and springy, which for me is pretty unusual. And if you do want some more information on how to actually choose a running shoe, then you should check out our video that's unsurprisingly titled How to Choose a Running Shoe. And whilst you're there, just give GTN a like and a follow. And if you've maybe had some running experience in casual shoes, whether that was due to a mistake or you were unaware, let us know how you got on. You can do that in the comments section below. Or maybe you're like me and you're guilty of doing far too much walking and wearing your running shoes casually.